Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to go into a yoga philosophy topic, the 5 Kleshas. Now, what does Patanjali mean when he talks about the Kleshas? These are our obstacles and our blockages, the things that are really preventing us from getting to that state of samadhi. These are natural human tendencies, the ways that we push ourselves farther and farther from our state of enlightenment. Our first klesha is avidya. Now, avidya in Sanskrit is meaning not true knowledge. So basically, vidya meaning true knowledge and starting at the beginning meaning not. So a sense of false knowledge. What do we mean by this? In our yoga practice, we try to always stay true to ourselves and true to our nature. But avidya is almost having a sense of the world that we believe to be true, but it has nothing to do with the sense of nature. It's not true knowledge and true identity. So these are our misconceptions of reality. Sometimes you will meet people that have such strong beliefs, but you can tell they're rooted in something that is not really connected to nature or reality. So these misconceptions over time, if we keep believing them, they're really gonna kind of separate us from ourselves and separate us from the truth in the world. So we're always trying to make sure that we're coming from a place of truth, a place of real, natural energy. And how does our yoga practice bring us back to what is true knowledge? Now, yoga itself is this pursuit of true knowledge. When we're looking for samadhi, why do we feel enlightened? Why do we feel lighter, better, and happier? Because that true knowledge is actually coming into us. We can refer to it almost as that godly universal knowledge. Things like all is good. Everything that God creates in His image is good. The universe is all working in harmony. A tip for avidya, our yoga practice really gives us that intention of, I am not just my body. I am so much more than that. And that really is your truth. You are not just this physical being. Doing yoga postures is not just a physical practice. You are more than that. And you're capable of more than that. You have a potential. This is your truth. When you're on that mat, when you're preparing for meditation, meditation is a place where you can sit and allow the truth to come to you, allow divine energy to speak its truth to you. And that's what our yoga practice is really all about, getting back to truth. So use your practice with intention. Try to let the outside world be the outside world, and nothing can touch your inside. Nothing can touch your truth or nature's truth. Don't get caught up in expectations, pressure. Just know that when you come back to yourself, when you sit down, you can allow divine energy to just flow all through you. And the more you practice that divine energy will never leave you. It will stay on the inside. And you will know what is right, what is wrong, what is true. It's all coming from within. Our second blockage and klesha is asmita. Always meaning not. And smita in this sense can mean expanding, almost of the self. So not self-expanding. Now we're talking about our ego. We're talking about egoism and the sense of I, our I-ness. Now, society is really egocentric. We are constantly putting ourselves before anything else. We're not really seeing the big picture in life. We're focusing on, how am I affected? How do I feel? What do I do? And this really can block us from having eternal happiness, because if we're constantly focusing on ourselves, we're suffering from all of these thoughts, these obsessive, repetitive thoughts. Now, we know in our meditation practice, we try to free the mind from thinking. So free the mind from negativity. When we're so concentrated on our own selves, you're never going to be free from thoughts. You're going to be obsessing about everything around you and how it's affecting you. And we use our yoga practice to get really a sense of distance from ourselves. Just as we know that we are more than our physical body, we are also more than our mind. Our thoughts are that sense of false reality. Our thoughts are not real. They're just something that the mind is creating. So in Asmita, we use yoga to really make sure that we can distance ourselves from our own sense of identity, our own egoism. So the more you distance yourself from your ego, the more perspective you have on the world. If I'm not thinking about myself all the time, I can start to think about others. I can start to think about the planet and nature. And when you think about others, that sense of goodness just flows through you. You have more empathy, more compassion, less suffering. You're not thinking about how everything is going to affect you, how it's going to worry you, how scared you feel. You're thinking about, how can I give? How can I serve? How can I better my community? How can I learn to help others? So yoga is really your time to be of service. We start by bettering ourselves, freeing ourselves from these blockages so that we can give back and help others. And the beauty of this cycle is helping others break those blockages as well. So really try to embrace that sense of ego death, where you just let your ego die. It's not something that's going to happen very easily. It's not something that just one day you have your ego and the next day it's gone. It's an ongoing practice. It's something that some days you feel a lot stronger in your sense of detachment, and other days it's harder. So just remember, you are more than your physical body, more than your mind. And the more you give, the more you act generously and selflessly, the more good things are going to come to you naturally. Our third klesha is raga. Now, raga is continuing this sense of obsession and suffering, but this time we're talking about worldly ideas and worldly possessions. So this can be attachment towards your body, attachment towards material things, towards experiences, towards ideas in your mind. This is really those things that take out our sense of control. So if we are so obsessed and attached to something, if we feel that this is a part of me, a part of my identity, then you have the opportunity to lose that thing, and now you're missing something. So that's going to bring in all those feelings of fear, that sense of frustration, that sense of now I've lost control. But all of that is all a part of your false reality. You don't need to be attached to anything to be happy or to be yourself. You are completely free of all of that. You just need to be, just to breathe, just to be alive. So our yoga practice helps us detach from these things because it continues this process of detaching from our thoughts. Control of the mind. The more you meditate, the more you find concentration and focus. This is your dharana and dhyana. The more you can control that silence in between the thoughts, then the less suffering. Because we're not actually suffering sometimes, we're just thinking about suffering. Oh no, this is going to happen to me. If I lose my home, what's going to happen? If I lose my friends, if I lose a family member, what if I stop my career? Then who am I going to be without this thing? Without this identity? If I get hurt, what can I do without my body? But you're limiting yourself from your entire potential, from your entire being. You don't need any of that to be happy. So we continue to practice detachment, getting bigger perspective. All of these things, all of these worldly things are just a part of the small picture. There's so much more out there, and we don't have to limit ourselves to just this. We can really embrace the power of the world around us. And that starts with the power within. So the more you control your thoughts, the more you can focus on something, the more power you have, because you have control. And the hardest thing is to not have control. So if we're constantly thinking, every day our mind is filled with worries, Every day our mind is filled with what ifs. Do we really have a sense of control over ourselves, over our mind? Not really. So the more you gain control, the more power you have. Once you have the sense of power, then you are able to do whatever you want. Now your potential and your capacity is even bigger than before. Our fourth klesha is devesa. Now, devesa is this tendency to avoid and adverse things, so aversions and avoidances. Now, we all have those tendencies that are rooted in fear, that are rooted in worry, that it ends up changing the way we live our lives. We kind of end up avoiding certain scenarios, maybe certain types of people, so that way we don't have to have this suffering that we think we're going to have. So being scared of things kind of makes us take less risks. And sometimes by not taking that risk, you're kind of staying in place and you're not really taking a step forward, not really challenging yourself and your potential. So in devesa, we're trying to really remove that blockage, to not avoid things, to go one step after each other, to make progress, to self-develop. And it's such a beautiful thing that our yoga practice is really getting us to that point where we're becoming fearless. And it's totally normal to fear things, but we can't let that fear prevent us from actually doing more, living our lives, taking different paths and going on adventure. So we have to really use our practice, especially our meditation practice, to find stillness and to listen to ourselves. Now, when you're meditating, those thoughts that are repeating, really try to listen to them. And then within that silence, go deeper. Ask those deeper questions. Like, why do I get triggered by these scenarios? Do I avoid those type of people just to avoid those scenarios? Because then you avoid those feelings and then you feel as if you're not suffering. More possibilities, then you can't ever find out what that greatest version of yourself is going to be. So how can we reach samadhi if we can't take steps forward? If we're constantly thinking about the fear, the misconception, the lack of faith. We have to remove all of that in order to get to that greatest version of ourselves. And that takes us into our last and fifth klesha, abhinivesa. This is our sense of our fear to live, or our fear of death. So we have this will to live. We want to live so much that we're scared to die. And this is a very common blockage and obstacle for all of us because there is such a misconception around this idea of death. That once you die, it's all over. That is the ultimate suffering, is to die. That you cause harm and sadness for your friends and family. And of course, losing a loved one or the idea of death really can be overwhelming because it's something so far away and so out of reach, especially for the mind to comprehend. Because the mind is all about thoughts. And in death, there is no thoughts. But the same thing as in samadhi, there's no more thinking. There's no more thoughts. But that also comes no more worries. So it's really playing with this cycle of life. With life comes death. With good comes bad. There's this real magnetic energy in between opposites that when we realize they're just parts of the same whole, it really is the same thing and the same idea that we have to accept in our hearts. So with life comes death. We cannot be scared of death because then we're going to stop living. We can't be scared of living for the fear of death. We have to just keep on tearing down those blockages and getting closer to our true nature. Because once you get into that sense of true self and being, this sense that's coming from the divine, then you're not really scared to die because there is no life or death when we're talking about our soul. When we're talking about our energy. Your energy is not something that can just come and go, that lives and dies. You can take it further into the sense of reincarnation, if you believe in that, or in other Buddhist ideologies. Also in Indian traditions, there's so many gods that discuss this idea of rebirth. And in yoga, this really is a concept because we know that if our soul cannot go away, if it's everlasting, then even when your body dies, your soul must move on. Maybe it goes into a different molding, a different temple. It's able to live on in a different way. This is why a lot of yogis talk about their past lives, because sometimes your soul gets that sense of memory, that little wink of, oh, I've been here before. Because our soul is everlasting. We're a part of the cosmos. We are light energy. It's not something that can just disappear. So we are so much more powerful than we actually think we are. The sense of death can be more as an appreciation to live. Be grateful for your body, grateful for your mind, but don't let it prevent you or block you from using your energy and expanding your energy to your greatest potential. And as you were born with eternal happiness, just like babies, they're born so innocent. They're not scared of the world. They're not thinking the same thoughts that we develop as adults. Most of our thoughts are coming from the outside world. They're not actually coming from within, from what you're feeling. So use your kleshas. Find your freedom from suffering. It's going to be an everyday practice. It's a dedication. And yoga is a dedicated practice. You have to show up. You have to catch yourself when you're having those tendencies, and you have to work on it. And we can allow each other the space and the grace to work on these things. We can really help each other along the way. Maybe recognize when people are being triggered by certain things and give them the space to heal and to work on it, as opposed to judging them, using the situation to think more about yourself and how it affects you. Let's help each other as a collective work on our kleshas, work on our obstacles. Allow each other to be, to breathe, and to grow. So the more you educate yourself on these types of blockages, the more you will recognize it in the world. And the more you practice within yourself these 5 kleshas, the better you will be at just kind of removing yourself from your weaknesses and getting stronger and stronger, awakening more power. So I hope you enjoyed this video, that maybe you learned some things. If you have other knowledge on the kleshas, please comment down below. Or if you have different ways that you think we can work on these things. That way, this is a shared process. We can really talk about the things that are hard for us to go through and share those stories. Not being attached, but helping each other detach. So thank you so much for listening. I will see you soon with another video. Have a wonderful day.